Hello there, and thank you for joining me on yet another edition of The Storytellers. This has been a series where we've had to sit down with the people behind the news. We're talking about the guys at the fourth estate of the realm, the storytellers themselves, the ones who decide what makes the front page, what makes the back page. But oftentimes than not, we hardly sit down to talk to them. So this is the mentorship series where we sit with journalists from across the continent to discuss and get what gets them ticking. My name is Babatunde Femi Okunla. Thanks for joining me yet again. Every week we've had to explore journalist after journalist. Today I've got a beautiful woman from Nairobi, Kenya. She's a journalist, health journalist, and medical journalist. That's totally different from a health journalist, by the way. Well-traveled, vast, and there's the shocker. She left the medical field to go into journalism. I'm not talking about part-time, I'm talking about full-time right here. Well, Mercy Korir. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, you did.
Yes. It's good to have you join me today on the show.
Thank you, Tunde.
Yes, I'm just going to go straight on to ask the very question I remember asking you the very first time I met you. You're a medical doctor.
Yes, I am.
She's a medical
I
doctor.
trained for 5 years and a year of internship.
Did your whole housemanship, everything?
Everything.
Yes.
And got licensed by the medical board in Kenya.
And you practiced as well
And I practiced
for
as
4
well.
good years.
4 years, yes.
And she left for journalism. I want to ask you the first reaction from people when they meet you. You tell them that story.
I think being African, we hold medicine in such high regard. It's a noble profession, and it is a noble profession. So one of the first reactions, even from my own mother, was wondering if this child is okay. Like, what are you thinking? You're leaving a prestigious or a noble profession to become a journalist. Are you okay? Did anyone force you to do medicine? Did you? Are you like in a sort of crisis? What's happening?
Talk to us.
What's happening? What's wrong? So that's still the reaction I get even until now. Where people are wondering what is it all about this. But yes, so what I did so that because I expected that I would get that reaction where people think, it's unheard of in our African setting where after you have been trained for so many years, you've worked, you have a big title as a doctor, you move on to become a journalist. So I knew I would get that reaction. So what I did, I went back to school. While I was still working as a doctor, I went back to school to do my master's in communication because I figured for people to take me seriously in what I really want to pursue is to present papers and show that, this are my papers, this is what I want to pursue. And no, I wasn't forced into doing medicine. I chose to do medicine as well as choosing to do journalism. And the reason I chose to do journalism was I figured now I have my medical degree. How do I use this medical degree for the benefit of the people? Many doctors will sit in a clinic and see people, treat people, and that's what I did.
Yeah.
Now, as a journalist, I'm still a doctor who is treating people and addressing people's issues in a different way, telling their stories, asking the people in authority, the policymakers, the right questions that those people who are not in a position to ask them can ask, and coming from a point of understanding how the system works and our Kenyan system, how it works, both in the public sector and the private sector where I worked, then I figured I have an understanding. Mm-hmm. I can ask the right questions. I know where the shoe pinches for the people whose stories I'm telling. And the people whose stories we are telling are not just the common man who will come to hospital. Even the healthcare providers themselves have stories that need to be told. Wow. So I'm just using medicine from a different perspective as opposed to sitting behind a desk or doing ward rounds or being in theater, which I can still do.
And she's doing an amazing job, by the way. We should get into that. Now, I want to ask you, you've mentioned Nairobi and your part of the world, Kenya, where you practice. I want to know which was harder, being someone from the sciences trying to break into media, into the arts, or you being a woman, reporting developmental issues and the African context. Which, when you think about it right now, seated right here, which do you think was easier? or was more difficult, more challenging?
I think the one that was more challenging was moving from science to reporting human, what do you call, social sciences, as in social issues of life, art, and because journalism is like an art. So
Yeah.
moving from a purely scientific background into reporting was really difficult. I remember one of my first days when I was doing stories and reporting. I came from a point where certain words in medicine have to remain as they are, because if you translate them or if you change them, then I used to feel like the meaning sort of changes. But then I realized that, if I report as a scientist,
Yeah.
then I'll be reporting to other scientists.
Wow.
And I'll be losing other people. So it took time, and I'm still learning just to simplify and not lose meaning. As a woman, I think for me, what sort of cushioned me and made my journey a little bit easier as a woman is having the title doctor. Because with that title, then people don't see you as a woman or as a girl, because most people see me
See,
as
as a
a girl.
professional.
They see a professional. So
Wow.
for me, it sort of cushioned me in the newsroom. I didn't get the harassment that I had happens in the newsroom about on that many women get harassed.
Yeah.
Because I started as an intern in the newsroom, and I had been told of stories of what happens to interns in the newsroom. They get a hard time. So for me, I think having that title, then people saw me as a professional as opposed to an intern who's just trying to venture
Wow.
into journalism.
Wow.
So it sort of cushioned me. So for me, the hardest bit was just changing my mind from a purely scientific thinking to now thinking like an everyday other person.
Let's talk about the stories you've had to cover, and you've had to cover quite an extensive. I forgot one of a mentor. Like she says, that inspiration is Sanjay Gupta. All right, so you have to know where she's coming from. I want to ask you, as journalists, we pursue so many stories, and when you meet people, they say, "Oh, I love the story you did and everything." And sometimes you think about it like, "Really, that's not my most impacting story," because you pursue the stories. Have you had such experiences? And would you say, what would you say in your own word was the one story that took a lot out of you? That when you think about it, you're like, "This story, perhaps it did not receive the recognition or all of that, but this was a really good story."
Wow, that's a difficult one to answer, because
I know.
you often think
Every week you're
about,
churning out stories.
yes, you often think about that story that either impacted you or had a lot of impact to many other people. That would have been much easier for me to answer, as opposed to which story I thought had I think I remember, and it was a most recent one. But I'm sure if I sit down and try and remember,
No, right?
I would. It was actually two stories. The first one, a story I did most recently, was on codeine-based cough syrup abuse,
Wow.
where I met a young man who had been using those codeine cough syrups for a very long time,
Right.
and he had a stash of the boxes that he had used for over a long time, and he had kept them. So what he told me was that he keeps them so that one day he will tell himself the pieces of land he would have bought if he had translated these boxes into better investment. And I thought that story didn't get the attention that it should have, because I thought it was a bigger problem among the youth, because they think it's codeine. Then it's not. We're not really abusing a drug as such, because it's not like alcohol or marijuana or smoking cigarette. It's a much softer. But when you look at it as an opioid, then it's a bigger problem. America is fighting that problem of opioid misuse, abuse, and such. And I think the week after I did my story, BBC Africa did the same story
on Nigeria.
Nigeria.
Yeah,
And that
I was
one
gonna say
was
that's,
and that one was trending. And yet I had done a similar story before, and so I felt well.
Right.
But anyway, the story in Nigeria brought the same impact as I would have wished, so it sort of complemented.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think that, and the second one that I would think of very quickly was I did a story on female genital mutilation, repairs after female genital mutilation, because a lot of the time the stories we do is of women who do female genital mutilation, the adverse effects it has on the girls or after birth, and all those things.
Yeah.
So I did a story about how doctors can actually repair, reconstruct where need be, and they give the woman a sort of feeling like a woman again.
Wow.
And that story, well, didn't receive the airtime that it got. And later on, people, when there was a topic about there's a doctor who went to court seeking that female genital mutilation should be legalized. And so the discussion emerged about, can this thing be reversed? Can it not be done? What is there any medical? But I was thinking, I did this story.
Yeah, and that happens. Yeah, like
and I did a story of a woman who underwent a repair after FGM.
Okay.
I'm thinking, I did this story, so what happened? There was no impact. Then these questions are arising. So yeah, but that was a difficult question.
I get it. I get it, because I could tell you going through like, but that's the amazing thing. You win some, you lose some, and you keep doing better still. I want to ask you. We talk about mediums as journalists. We say, oh, I'm a print journalist, I'm a videographer, I'm into just the audio platform, just radio. Which has been your favorite, medium to use as a journalist? And I'm going to get into that conversation with you, because I had a conversation earlier on with my guests last year. They said, it depends on what story you're trying to tell, but in your own case, in Nairobi, in Kenya generally, what seems to...
I think for me, what has worked is TV.
TV, because, why did you say that?
Because, well, in TV where I am, I have gotten a lot of support to do my stories, to have my show, to have the guests that I want. I've gotten a good platform to model and package my show as I envisioned it, or as my editors envisioned it, bringing me on board. So for me, it has been a good platform, and then it's a platform where you get to actually express yourself, like what we are doing now, because you get to talk. People get to see the emotion. People get to feel what you're feeling. People can see. So for me, I think TV has worked for me better. Though I still do print. But
she has a bias already. We can tell. Don't worry. Don't try to placate her. We can tell. She's a TV person. So young girl who's looking at you, your story is really inspiration. We have to really wrap up right now. Your story has been inspirational in terms of the person who crosses over, breaking the barriers, limitations, doing what you have to do, getting the paperwork. That's important. I keep telling you. You might not have it initially, but you do have to get it. If you know to be respected, to just do what you need to do, and the challenges you've had. What advice would you give a young lady, a young girl, a young guy who's watching you right now? Very quickly, say, Auntie, I just wanted to call you to say this. What do you think?
There's no shortcuts. Simple. There's no shortcut.
Wow.
You have to put in the legwork. You have to put in hours into whatever it is that you're doing. There is no shortcut. Anything that is done quickly ends quickly. But if you put in time and you plan, if you want to do medicine, it will take this amount of time. It's not easy, those years of doing school.
Wow.
It's not easy. It takes time. If you're doing journalism, you have to do the legwork. You have to do the paperwork. And for me, I started as an intern in the newsroom.
Wow.
Even after being a doctor, I started as an intern. And it took time for me to get to where I am. So there's no shortcut.
There's no shortcut. Thank you so much, Mercy Korir, for this time out. I wish I could go on and on and on and on and on. Right now we're in Geneva, and I said, you owe me an interview, and I'm not letting you go. My name is Babatunde Femi Oknola. Well, here's another wrap-up on the edition of The Storyteller. Who will we be having next? You just have to tune in to find out in a bit. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Thank you.